So my name is Keith. I'm from Singapore. The other side of the earth is humid all year round. I'm currently working as a
Сингапура, хотя я
consultant
езжу по
at
всему миру, и я работаю в своей компании консультантом. Уже несколько раз был здесь, в Москве. Это вот ссылочка на мой блог. Это вот несколько фотографий виды Сингапура. Если вы когда-нибудь там были, вам повезло. Если нет, обязательно съездите. Мы ежедневно проводим
awesome tools and techniques for capturing and cracking the credentials, but we want to fill the gap from after cracking a low privilege account to that we capture from net bias or LMR WPAT attacks to compromising the entire domain, as well as to help with a few tricky issues that we as penetration testers face from day to day. So we developed a tool called Posture to help with this. Posture aims to automate a number of commonly used techniques performed during an internal network test after a low privilege account has been compromised. Some functionalities of Posture includes automating the privilege escalation, automating the lateral movement, and there's a few couple of convenience module that finds and dumps passwords. So privilege escalation is when you have a low privilege account and you want to elevate the privilege to a higher privilege account, such as a domain admin. Lateral movement is when you compromise a host in the network and you want to move to compromise other hosts in the network and finally to compromise the entire domain. So how does the name Posture comes about? Posture is a type of jumping spiders that feeds on other spiders, known for their intelligent hunting behavior and problem-solving capabilities that's normally found in larger animals. We find it a good fit for what the tool does. So just to show you, these are some photos of spiders. We are Spider Lab, so we love spiders. This is a typical network environment that we see where there are some hosts that's in the domain and there's other hosts which in the work group mode. The attacker could be an insider threat or could have got into the network through phishing or some other means. So a basic idea of how Posture works. First, it scans the network for net buyers and hosts and domain controllers. Of course, checks whether the credentials are valid or not. Enumerates the users in the domain admin group. This is useful in the later part. So it does some low-hanging fruit like check the sys volume for the group policy preferences for password, and then checks whether is it vulnerable to MS14068. It's an old vulnerability, but we find it during tests from time to time. So next it checks whether which host does the account have admin access on. Then it dumps the passwords, hashes, and also checks for what impersonation tokens are on the host. We'll explain what impersonation token is later on. It collects the hashes and credentials and move on to the next target. So as time goes on, it has more and more credentials that it use to target other hosts in the network and try to gain domain admin access. It will auto-elevate the permissions if an impersonation token belonging to the domain admin is found on any other host. And finally, it compromises the domain controller and run other convenience modules, which is finding sensitive data as well as passwords. So it's just a basic flow diagram that I did of how the tool works. First, the tool starts by attacking the low-hanging fruit. Of course, the most easiest is the sys volume folder and the group policy preferences. Any authenticated domain user account is able to access this folder. The passwords are encrypted in an AES 32-bit key. There are some common locations where the passwords are saved, like drives map, local users and groups, scheduled tasks, services, and data sources. The 32-bit AES keys is published on Microsoft site, so anyone can decrypt it. So this is just an example of where the passwords are stored and what the AES encrypted key looks like in the group policy. So there's a patch long time ago for this vulnerability. The patch prevents you from creating new GPO preferences that rely on safe password. However, it does not remove the old insecure password. So if you have an account that you use in the group policy preferences that you have not removed or disabled, an attacker can still use the account to get elevate privileges. So just a simple flow of how the attack works: verifies credentials, and then checks the seed volume folder for passwords, and then decrypts it and use it to attack other hosts in the network. The second thing we're going to look at is MS1406 is a very old vulnerability which we still find in some networks. An attacker is able to use, it's a very interesting vulnerability because an attacker is able to use an underprivileged account and elevate the privileges to that of a domain admin account. An attacker is able to forge a pack that would be accepted by the KDC as legitimate. An attacker can create a fake pack claiming that the regular user is a member of the domain admin group. Thus, if the domain controller is vulnerable, an attacker will be able to elevate the privileges for the domain user to that of a domain admin. There are some tools out there for testing MS1406 as well as exploiting them. Responder has a good tool called FindSMB2 uptime. One thing to note when using this is it checks the last uptime since the reboot, so it doesn't check whether it's vulnerable or not. InPacket has a tool called Golden Pack that exploits the vulnerability. So this is an example of what happens when you run the tool. First, it checks whether the time is in sync with the domain controller, and then it tries to syncs the time. And then after that, it exploits the vulnerability, dumping the plain text password from the domain controller. Of course, after that, checks whether the credentials are valid or not, and then dump the hashes, all automatically. So this is a video of the tool. The same thing, but in a video form. So you don't really need to do anything, you just need to provide a domain user account, and then if it's vulnerable, it does all the privilege escalation and lateral movement in the network. Okay, next. So assuming there's no password in the sys volume and MS1406 is not exploitable, so what can we do next? There's something called impersonation token. When a user logs into the system, it creates a delegation token, which is converted to an impersonation token when the user logs out. The impersonation token has exactly the same rights and properties as the delegation token. However, the delegation and impersonation token remains on the system until the server is rebooted. So if an attacker gains admin access to a host and there happens to be an impersonation token belonging to a domain admin, he will be able to add himself to a domain admin group and to dump credentials, thus compromising the entire network. Just a basic flow of how it works. So this is a screenshot of the tool. So after gaining access to one of the hosts, it finds that it enumerates the list of users in the domain admin group. And then it finds that there's an impersonation token belonging to a domain admin. So it attempts to elevate the privileges using the token and then add a new account to the domain admin group and then followed by dumping all the hashes. So just a video of the tool. We'll do a live demo after. So as you can see, if it's able to dump the hashes from the domain controller, and then after that, it does some analysis like saying which accounts uses the same hashes and just for reporting purposes. And it also provides you all the password, plain text password, which was used to compromise the host if you intend to do further testing after that. So if no impersonation token is found, Porsche will run Mimikatz as well as dump the local password hashes. So if there are any new password hashes, they will be added to the database and then use these password and hashes to attack other hosts in the network. It will do so until all hosts is compromised or when it gets domain admin access. So there's this other thing about shared local administrator password. Normally in an organization, they have something called a base image where the administrators would configure it with a default password. This is generally used so that the IT staff can support the workstations and servers. So from an offensive point of view, you can get from compromising one host in the network and then to compromising all the hosts in the network pretty easily. So Porsche actually checks whether multiple machines are using the same shared local administrator password. So even if you rename the local administrator password, but yet using the same account, and whether they are in the workstation or domain mode, you can still compromise the machine. So what if you don't have admin access on the box? There's a group policy setting that allow users to connect remotely using RDP. So the 2000 actually attacks uses this, but it's just some extra things that I like to add so that you can do some manual testing. So there are a number of common tools and techniques out there for escalating the privilege to that of system or admin, as well as bypass UAC that I've added to the slides. Yeah. We also added a new module that we find that sometimes even if you are local admin on the box, you don't have access to a certain folder like finance folder or HR folder, and there's so many credentials that you want to try to find which account gives you access to the shared folder, because it might contain some sensitive information like credit cards or HR documents or financial statement. So this tool is able to help you find the right creds to get you into the shared folder. We have included a number of modules to Porsche, such as dumping the master keys for the BitLocker, as well as finding KeePass database. And if KeePass is running on the host and the user has opened it, you'll be able to dump the clear text password, as well as TrueCrypt master keys, wireless password, and other things like Fuzilla passwords and stuff, and including browser password. We just add it because it's nice to get more creds and sensitive data. And you also do things like search these for PAN numbers, credit cards, as well as you can search the memory of a certain process for card numbers as well. So this is just a screenshot of the output of running the module that search for PAN numbers, search for interesting files. So it has find a few documents like Fuzilla, Site Manager XML, VNC password, and other stuff. So it prints the first few lines it also search for files matching passwords.doc or password.txt, and then it displays the first few lines of the output. And then you also do things like decrypt the password and shows you the clear text password like unattend.xml and VNC INI. It will decrypt the password as well. So you also do things like dumping browser credentials. So if you are running like Chrome or Firefox, the attacks requires the user to be currently logged in. So it checks which user is logged in, and then run a task in that user session so that it's able to dump the Firefox credentials. This is just a video of dumping the Chrome credentials from the browser. So it has checked that there's this account called Milo that's currently logged in, and then it will run the PowerShell script. in that user session so as to dump the credentials. You also run things like Wi-Fi password, but there's no Wi-Fi password on this host that we tested. So you found, it's dumping the credentials for the browser now. Yep, we found the password to a Google login page, and it enumerates the list of applications that's on the host. Sorry. Okay, next, we like to elaborate on one of the modules which talks about searching for card numbers on disk and in memory for processors. So it uses a few PowerShell scripts because why repeat the wheel when there's existing tools out there? So it enumerates the list of applications on the host which you have admin access on, enumerates the process which host is running which process. It provides a table so that you can choose which process to dump search and dump the card numbers, search and find the card numbers. So this is just a screenshot of finding the card numbers. It checks it against the LUNG algorithm to make sure they are valid so that to reduce the number of false positive. There are other modules like KeePass, where if KeePass is, administrators are known to store passwords to other web applications or system in KeePass. So if KeePass is running a system, it might be useful to dump the clear text credentials so that you can just grab the file and decrypt it offline instead of trying to crack the KeePass database. So this is just a screenshot of dumping the TrueCrypt master keys. So after it tests all the accounts, if you run out of hash password to test, or when it's compromised the entire network, it will analyze the password hashes that's been captured throughout the process and see which accounts have a blank password or which accounts are using the same password. So it's generally useful during penetration testing reports to say which accounts are using the same password. Normally it's because the administrator normally creates a default password for the user, and the user have not changed the password yet. Future improvement that we plan to make to the tool is like checking whether there's a password reuse between the administrative account and the user account that administrator use, because they generally have like two accounts, whether they are using the same password or not, as that could be a finding in the report. So this is just a screenshot like saying what hashes you captured and what accounts are using the same password hash and what accounts are using a blank password. Future enhancement that I plan to add is like adding MS SQL support to find what's the right account that gets you access to that database and dumps a sample of the database, as well as search for sensitive data in the database. I have added the code inside the tool, but I have not really have time to test it yet, as well as creating a Docker image so that anyone can easily run it. And of course, add MS0607 and MS17010 so that it's easier to pwn the network. Because why not? Yeah. Okay. I'll do a demo. Okay, now I have a couple of VMs. I'm trying to scan them. So I have capture and crack a credentials that I capture from Responder, and then now I'm trying to see what access this account has. And then as well as run, sorry, can't see it on the screen. Sorry. As well as run the password modules to dump all sensitive data from the target machine. So firstly, it checks that what's the users in the domain admin group, and then it checks the sysvolume folder whether there's any credentials. It decrypts the credentials and tests the account. So in this case, there's no valid credentials that's found. And then it runs, it finds that the host is rounded to MS14068. And then it checks whether the time is in sync with domain controller. If it's not in sync, it will adjust the time automatically. And then it exploits the vulnerability. It runs Mimikatz to dump the clear text credentials. So we found an account called admin and password 1 on the host. And then next, it dumps the password hashes for the whole domain controller. So depending on the scenario, it might be you find a impersonation token, it might use that. So based on the flow diagram, it tries to do everything automatically. And then it finds the list of hashes from the domain controller. And then now, if it has compromised the entire domain, it dumps all the sensitive data like VNC password. We use a bunch of scripts and our own tools just to make everything easier. So it continues with a post-exploitation module. It dumps the FileZilla password, decreases the VNC password. BitLocker is not enabled on the machine, so it can't find any recovery keys. 1 second. Oh, sorry. I'll have to run it again because one of the machines is dead. Give me a moment. Sorry, I have to run again. As you can see, the TrueCrypt volume is mounted, and there's a key pass window is open. So the tool should be able to dump the password for both of them. Just wait a moment. It's just taking a bit of time, but I have run it previously, so let's go through the. So as you can see, it finds a number of KeePass database, and it has downloaded the KeePass database, and then it attempts to, it finds a number of other sensitive documents, and then it detects that KeePass is running, so it dumps the clear text credentials of KeePass, as well as that gives you the master keys for TrueCrypt, which you can decrypt it offline, and then it checks whether there's any browser credentials and so on. So it ends when there's nothing else to test, or it has compromised the entire domain and all hosts. Yeah, so it's still running, so let's go on. Okay, let's go on to the remediation and how to fix this issue or how to prevent the tool from working. So Microsoft have created a tool called Labs, which generates the password that is automatically changed on managed machines. So you can prevent, from all the machines from using the same shared password by using this tool. About fixing impersonation token for high privilege account like domain admin account, you can check the box that says account is sensitive and cannot be delegated, and it will stop the impersonation attack. Next would be Mimikatz. The plain text credentials that you can dump from memory is to install the hotfix, disable Windows Digest or you can add a registry key, and then you have to reboot the machine after you do that. I have uploaded all the tools to my GitHub page, so if you have any feedback or suggestion, you can add a ticket to the GitHub page. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Okay.
Hello. Does your tool have any privilege escalation techniques which are not implemented in commonly used tools such as PowerSploit, Impacket, and so on?
It uses some of these techniques but automates it so that you don't have to do anything, and it speeds out the time from compromising the entire network.
So no new techniques, yes?
Not for now, but we're going to add more in future. We just want to get it working, add the common attack techniques, and then get in and out of the network and compromising all the hosts in a short amount of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
And one more question. Sometimes administrators store VBE scripts on the main controller. It is Visual Basic scripts encoded with Microsoft Script encoder. Yeah. Does your tool can decode it and search passwords of IT staff?
Not at this time, but I will take your suggestion into consideration as it's kind of useful.
Okay.
Thanks for your help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. What about CM bypassing or maybe our antivirus bypassing by Porsche?
It runs PowerShell, so I plan to add some things like encoding the stuff and bypassing in future. Because we ran out of time, so it's just to get the proof of concept up and then add in more stealth techniques in future.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your suggestion. Okay, thank you.